Hello, founders. Welcome. Startups.com. We are live every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We do this for our community and for the internet, the YouTubes. If you're joining us there, do the YouTube thing right away. Like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate all the feedback. We are going to be jumping into pitch decks. We do that every single Tuesday. Appreciate everybody who participates, sends their pitch decks in. I am joined by my fabulous co-host, as always, Will Schroeder. He is known as the pitch deck doctor around these parts. 9-time founder, 5 exits, and has helped raise close to $1 billion in terms of helping startups raise capital funding. Will, welcome.
Ed, I tell you what, man, after we did the last pitch deck, I dropped into your channel and I'm realizing I think you might be the pitch deck doctor now. I was like, man, this guy's crushing it. There's no doubt that, being this chief strategy officer got its perks, but I got to tell you, people are loving your stuff.
Well, that is high praise considering I tell people, this is a story that I tell. I say, I thought I knew how to do pitch decks, right? I've raised over $100 million. That's no small feat for my startups, other people's startups, and startup funds. But when I came here and I began checking out your stuff and I just watched it, I say, I became a Mandalorian. I said, this is the way. And now we do it the Startups.com way. Great collaboration between us.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. It's awesome. What do we get into today?
Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to show you, Will, a pitch deck that has not had any input, has not had any, gone through the course or anything like that. Just a pitch deck that I got from the audience. And as always, appreciate anybody who sends in their pitch deck. If you're interested, just leave a comment or just email us at advisor@startups.com. Let us know. If you're in the audience right now, you can ask any question that you want as we do this. This was sent to me, and so was no input. So, Will, I'm going to get you to walk through the principles, and then I'm going to show you a pitch deck that has put in some work, the founder, based on what we teach here, and we'll talk about how we improve it. How's that sound?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Let's do it here. So first is Mars, and it says, right out front, simplifying debt management, your first impressions on this cover slide.
This feels like it's unfinished. Is this like a draft? I mean, everybody's technically a draft. This feels, I'm all for Spartan. This feels pretty Spartan.
Yeah, this is pretty simple. This is a finished, or as finished as they want to get it. But one of the things just to point out is just that whatever you say at the bottom, simplifying debt management, like just use the space and make an impression. But I appreciate your first impression on this. So the problem, meet Maya, 26-year-old busy professional who's juggling multiple debt, student loans, auto loans, credit card balance, mortgages. Like many of us, she is struggling to keep up. I see this a lot, Will, where they kind of start to try and tell this story to say the problem. What are we missing here?
You know what? I hate tell a story. I hate it. Now, don't get me wrong. I love storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. But somewhere in the last 5 to 6 years, this parallel narrative in the startup world has come out, which is you really need to tell a story. And what people miss when they say that is your deck telling a story without you telling the story, like physically up there and giving it emotion and life and character, is so boring, and it almost always misses the mark. Now, I'm not knocking this one in particular. This is more me just saying the tell a story to me leads to get me away from what you were actually trying to tell me in hope that I'm going to pick up this story. I don't know anybody that's like, I don't want to be told what the business is. I want to get into your narrative. I'm not a single person who wants that.
We just don't have time to get into it. So, Will, I'm going to ask you, for everybody, and especially this founder, walk us through, just tell us what should be on the problem slide.
Problem slide's simple. Tell me exactly who the problem is for, meaning for 26 million Americans, and then tell me exactly what the severity of the problem is or the consequence of the problem. What specifically isn't getting done? So I need to know the size of the problem and the severity of the problem. And I need to know it in a single sentence right off the bat.
And I want to point that out. Single sentence right off the bat. An investor's not going to go through all these little bullet points. And this pitch deck also makes the cardinal sin here of now stretching the problem across 2 slides, and that's not advisable. You could pretty much say this in one slide, in one bold, stark headline to tell the investor what this business is all about.
Look, and you can do both here. In other words, you can just get to the one sentence, and then when you present it, you can add some character to it. But this whole idea that I'm going to talk through a narrative like I'm Steven Spielberg putting together a movie is just, it's trash.
Okay. So then moving along, debt mismanagement can lead to, so here's another problem slide. So we got 3 problem slides so far.
You also haven't told me anything I don't already know. So what value you're adding?
Okay. Next, the solution. So I see this happen all the time. They put solution, big bold letters, and there's like bullet points of all the things. And just, going to go through this. Mars simple all-in-one solution makes debt management stress-free. Our intuitive all-in-one platform. And then Mars transforms debt repayment. What's wrong with this slide?
It says a lot of things without telling me anything. It's basically saying we're an all-in-one solution, which doesn't tell me anything. Makes debt management stress-free, doesn't tell me anything. So I've gotten this far in the deck and I have no idea what the product actually is, which is a big problem. Our intuitive all-in-one platform, we just said all-in-one twice, consolidates debts. We just said debt management was the issue, automates payments and rewards users for good financial behavior. That could literally mean anything, right? How does it do that? What does it specifically do? And why is it fixing that problem? This is too amorphous.
And same prescription here, one major sentence that solves the problem. We're not going to go through these bullet points.
Yep.
Next, core features, typical.
Shit.
We see all these core features that just you just get a laundry list of stuff. What's the issue?
It's too much to digest. I mean, use the simple memory test always. It works every time. Put this in front of literally anybody, have them read it for as long as they want, close their eyes and read it back to you. Ed, close your eyes and read it back to me.
That's not going to happen. Not going to happen whatsoever.
Then it means you can't remember it. And again, it's not that the content isn't good. There's just too much to absorb. Give me the top 2 or 3 points because that I'll actually remember. A deck that I can't remember doesn't exist. A deck I can't remember does not exist. And so it's got to be memorable. It's got to be focused. It's got to be punchy.
Now, here's what stands out for me, and I think we should talk about this just for a moment. I look at these features, and these are really big features, and automatically, like you're talking debt consolidation is a solution unto itself.
The
now
whole
you're
market
adding,
unto itself. Yeah.
Payments, notification, budgeting tools, progress tracking, rewards program. And so automatically, Will, I don't know if you experience this, but sitting on the side of the investors, I automatically go, this is not going to happen. Like it's just, this solution doesn't exist. You're just throwing stuff out there like it's AI driven and we're putting it on the blockchain and blah, 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 blah. And you're not giving me any confidence. You're just kind of throwing stuff out there to see if you can catch my attention and impress me.
Right. And the challenge is it's tackling too big of an issue. What I'm looking for as an investor is I'm looking for a really specific issue, right? Because all the categories they mentioned are already being tackled, which means there's a voluminous amount of competition. Tell me where within all that mess we're going to play specifically. That's what I want to know.
Now we've got the why now slide. This gets into some trends and different things. Will, what is our usual line when it comes to the why now slide?
Why now, unless something has happened that is absolutely anomalous, right? Like COVID just happened and you have a COVID vaccine. The why now in almost every case falls flat. This slide is literally telling us that people have a lot of debt. It's like, no shit, right? Tell me something I don't know. What do you think?
Yep, I totally agree. It's got to be an inflection point or something that's really going to move the needle. Don't use the why now slides. All this can be integrated in different places.
Yep.
Now we get into market sizing. I'm going to skip this and just say, learn how to do a better TAM song. Will, we always talk about this, like total consumer debt, 17.8 trillion. That's not your total addressable market. Right. That's not how much money you're making. It's
right.
Straightforward. We got a good example that's working towards what we want to see. Mm-hmm. Competition. I'm not going to go through this. Will, what are your first impressions on the competition slide? Okay,
so we've got 2 really big competitors in YNAB and Credit Karma. And Credit Karma is massive. They are an absolute juggernaut. So I'm going to be hard pressed to believe that people are going to stop using Credit Karma because I want reminders about important dates. Do you know what I mean? Saying like, I understand that's just one feature, but that's also things where I'm like, I don't know that I need one-stop debt management. I need less debt. Show me how you're going to do that.
I'm curious, Will, let's talk about this for a moment. I see founders do this a lot, is they go in and they look at all the solutions and they say, okay, but it's fragmented, Will. And so we're going to put all those major problems, major solutions, the heavy lifts, all in a one-stop place. And I see this with e-commerce. I see this with creator economy, social media networks. It's the only place that you can go meet your friends, meet new friends, sell stuff, collect payments, send payments, all this stuff, share money with your friends, sign a mortgage together. Right. Well, what are your thoughts? Yeah, let's like really nail down to it. If a founder's thinking, I'm going to create the one-stop shop for this, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the one-stop shop is the last thing you want to be. A one-stop shop already means that you figured out all of the individual pieces. Walmart can be a one-stop shop because Walmart has single-handedly checked off every box and feature one by one. Amazon can be a one-stop shop because they started with specific categories and built on top of that. You don't start as a one-stop shop. You become a one-stop shop because you do all of the vertical focus things better than anybody else. So if this is your first rodeo, you're first getting into this market, show me where you're going to do the one thing better, not everything better. That's a recipe for disaster.
The only time I'll allow the one-stop shop to happen is if you're an aggregator. I'm watching this happen right now. Like
Yeah.
there are all these AI LLMs out there. So we're going to create the aggregator where you can go to one place, but you're accessing. You're not building the solution across the board, an aggregator.
Even then, that's not a one-stop shop. That's an aggregator, which in and of itself is a focal point.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
It may be one stop, but it's not a one-stop shop where you solve the problems. I get it. And so I want all the founders who are watching this, we talk about the deck, but at the same time, I want founders to think about the principles in which we're evaluating the business idea. And I think you're going to serve yourself really well by thinking about this and how we respond to some of these business models. Speaking of business models, we're implementing a freemium model. Actually, this is the one slide that I thought, although sparse, doesn't make all the erroneous errors except for this last box. But basic features are for free, and then we charge $18 a month. To me, hey, straightforward. I'm going to give it props.
For what though? What features are free, and what am I paying $18 a month for? I can't have a freemium to paid model unless I have something really compelling about what people are paying for that brings them over the paywall. That is the business model.
And that's where we've been totally lost up to this point in time. In of itself, follow the format, but this deck has a lot of gaps in it.
Yep.
Next, use of funds. So we're getting into the ask slide, use of funds. Okay, I'm going to skip over that. Team, I'm going to skip over the team slide. And that is the last slide, right there. So
okay.
The whole point of that little exercise, Will, was to just go through and kind of remind everybody and help founders understand where we're going to be heading in terms of what we're looking for. Any other last thoughts?
Yeah, and this is, I say this always, and I'll say this about the next one. Thanks for sharing it. Founders, again, us saying there's things missing, that's literally the part of building the deck. Like every single person that comes onto the Startups.com platform needs help with their deck. And so we have these same conversations. So if you're hearing this or you're like, oh, I don't want to share my deck because they may find things wrong with it, there's no way we won't find things wrong with it. That's the whole point of this exercise, right? The goal here isn't to have nothing wrong with your deck. The goal is to figure out what to work on, what to fix, what to improve. And there's always something to improve. So don't sweat it.
So here's the next deck that has a little more maturity to it. And we're going to see it. So I want to contrast and compare. And you're going to see, those of you watching, you're going to see some pretty stark differences in how a deck can change just if you follow some of these principles straightforward. But let's talk about CutFlow, all-in-one solution for business, seamless operations, and growth.
What's funny is it literally opens up with all-in-one, which is what we just said don't do. Now, here's what I don't like. All-in-one solution means nothing. For businesses, still tells me nothing other than it's B2B. Seamless operations and growth. None of this tells me anything about anything. Now, here's how us as founders typically get here. We get here because we've been thinking about this product for so long. Right? And what we're looking for is like a nice wrapper that kind of takes everything that we do and puts it into simple sentences or a simple tagline. In the process, we often end up saying nothing at all. What we want is to say, here's the problem, we solve this beautifully, right? What this winds up being, this tagline, is this kind of catch-all that, again, means nothing. What do you think, Ed?
Yes, this is where there's going to be some serious cognitive dissonance. And I want to point this out because as soon as we get into the deck, because I've been looking at this deck and working with the founder, you're going to realize, everybody out there is going to realize that what it says on the cover is completely different than what it says internally. And that's because you tried to go generic, you tried this catch-all, and then you end up losing the investor along the way. And let me show you right here, okay? So look at this. One all-in-one solution for business, seamless operation, and growth. And as soon as we get into the problem, we're going to talk about IT. And that wasn't mentioned on the cover. But let's go through this problem and talk about it here. It says 3.9 million U.S. micro businesses with fewer than 10 employees waste $9 billion on underutilized IT services due to inefficiency and fragmented tools. Okay, so first I want to point out before I get your reaction, Will, is think about the contrast between the previous deck that we saw where it had all like 3 slides with multiple bullet points. Now we got one slide with one sentence. So kudos there. Will, what's your reaction?
Okay, so a few things. I like the fact that it opened up with 3.9 million U.S. micro businesses. I love that. You told me exactly who we're going after. Fewer than 10 employees, perfect. You defined micro business, nailed it. Waste $9 billion. You gave me an actual dollar figure. Love it. So the first half of this, boom, 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 nailed it. The second half that I'm concerned about on underutilized IT services could literally mean anything. There's a gazillion IT services, so I don't really know what that means. Due to inefficiency, you just covered every part of IT there is in fragmented tools, which just means there's a lot of tools. You used a lot of words and you haven't told me anything. Now, the reason you've done that, and when I say you, I just mean all founders, is that we know what these things are. And this happens all the time. And I just want to dig into this, Ed. We're like, yes, it's underutilized IT services. It's exactly what we do. And you're like, yeah, if you already know what you do, right? Now, with that, we have an image here that makes no sense. It doesn't tie to what the business is whatsoever. And I love illustrations. I love images. We run the risk every time we use them that an illustration means a million things to a million people. We don't put a single visual in unless there is no possible way you could misinterpret it.
100%. Now, Will, I want you to hold that thought. And all the founders who are watching here, remember, you can ask questions at any point in time. Ask the questions. But, Will, I want us to go a little backwards because I think one of the issues is we could have a solution looking for a problem. Okay. So,
yeah, always.
Let's take a look at the solution and let's backtrack. So, CutFlow streamlines essential IT services and tools into a unified platform, enabling micro businesses to reduce IT spending by 30%. What does this say to you?
It says there's a lot of assumptions here that we haven't actually explained. Okay, so let me explain. Streamlines essential IT services. We actually haven't discussed what those even are. And into a unified platform. Why is a unified platform beneficial? In the previous problem, we mentioned that it was fragmented, but we still don't understand why fragmented is bad, right? So for example, on my desktop right now, on my machine, I've got a whole bunch of different apps. Technically, they're fragmented. They work beautifully, right? Like you can't just say fragmented and have me automatically understand why that's a problem or how it works. But for the founder, they know how it works. They say fragmented and they're like, this is exactly what that means. But they forgot to tell their audience.
One of the things that I think the founder's trying to focus and trying to share, and we're going to go one more slide and then we're going to kind of wrap it all together because I want to give this founder some great feedback, is this whole thing of you've got unused IT services. Okay, let's suspend the notion that we don't know what those are, but let's just IT services, and you're reducing IT spending by 30%. To me, that's compelling because it's got some actual numbers, it's relieving the pain, and it's telling you how much we're relieving the pain. That's what I see.
But I don't actually have any idea what essential IT services are.
Yeah.
Again, this would have been a great use of the visual. If I were going into the problem slide, and instead of having that illustration, I would easily just show maybe 3 or 4 big buckets of essential IT services.
Yeah. What could those be?
Yeah, because here's the thing. I've gotten to your solution and I have no idea what you actually do. That is the cardinal sin of a pitch deck. Now let me pause here for a second. At this point, Ed, in all the time you've spent as a GP at a firm looking at decks, how often do you spend more time after this slide?
Oh, we're done. We're done.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That terrifies me. You know, as 2 founders here that are trying to help lots of other founders, the idea that this deck, which might be a great startup, would have great founders, etc., lost its audience before it could even get there, is the worst thing ever. The way we lose our audience is we forget to tell them what the problem actually was or how we actually solved it. The last way we'll lose our audience before they ever get into the deck is not explaining what the market size is. We'll get there in a second. But here's the thing. When we're trying to present this idea, by the end of this slide, the investors should be saying, holy shit, tell me more. Because what you wanted to have just said is, the world is dying for this. We do exactly this, and it's worth billions of dollars.
Well, I love the way that you say it, and this is great because I want everybody to understand. I can't see the forest for the trees. I've been working with this founder, and we've been massaging, look at it, so I know what this startup does. And so we bring Will in, and he looks at it total fresh eyes and says, this is how an investor is going to react if they just see this slide fresh without you sitting over their shoulder and, sharing that story and being the voiceover. And so that to me is the value of sending out your deck to get this type of feedback.
Absolutely. And look, this happens all the time. I've been doing this for over 30 years and it happens to me too. So this is part of the process. You know what? That's what we're here for.
Okay. Now, Will, I'd set you up with this all-in-one sort of thing because now we're getting in the meat of this. So I wanted to show you what this startup actually does. Okay. And then let's do an exercise and try and go back and help this founder out and what problem solution statements we could do. But here we go. This is actually how it works. They're trying to illustrate. And this is where the illustration does actually serve its purpose in the sense that you've got all these services. And again, it's a tough sell to see all those services put together, but you've got profile management, scheduling, everything all in one spot.
Hold on, back up. What the hell does this do? And I'm not trying to be critical. I have no idea. Ed, can you explain it to me?
So what this does is it's supposed to be a central I believe it's supposed to be an aggregator. Don't quote me on this. That allows you to stay connected to all these different things that you need. It's creating an ecosystem. It's like one basic operating system for your ecosystem to do all these things.
I have no idea why or how any of this stuff is connected. Okay, so let me just, I'll give you how I'm trying to digest this, because I don't want to be critical. I just genuinely don't understand. So I see marketing and CRM, and I think to myself, that is a massive category. Okay, fine. I see sales tools. I'm like, okay, well, that's another massive category. Then I see loyalty network, and I'm like, what the hell does loyalty network have to do with sales teams and marketing? Then I see website builder and automations, and I'm like, okay, well, we're still kind of in the marketing space. Loyalty network, I could see loyalty referral, maybe. Then device ecosystem. I'm like, what the hell does that have to do with marketing and CRM? And then we get to reviews, and I'm like, okay, reviews are sort of maybe connected to marketing a little bit, but I still don't understand why that's a problem. And now I've got payment and accountability tools, and I'm like, why the hell are payments and accountabilities in the same app or platform as reviews? Doesn't make any sense. And then we're into messaging. And I'm like, messaging could be anything. That's so many platforms. I can't look at this and say, oh, clearly this solves a problem, because I kind of don't know what the problem is, Ed.
Okay, so that's where I get lost too. So this is where my mind is. I don't know if CutFlow is sort of your central dashboard where you can like connect APIs to everything, or you log into your whatever Salesforce and in one central dashboard, because I don't believe that this startup has solved or created a module that actually does each one of these things.
I'm always willing to just go on faith that the startup has done what they said they're going to do, right? I mean, we cross that bridge later on, right? So out of the gates, I'm like, okay, sure, you've built or can build whatever. I just don't, I have no idea what the intention of this product is.
Okay, so now let's dig in just a little bit more. And there is a market slide, but I skipped this for the reason here, because we're trying to dig in and understand. This is the freemium business model, go to market, competition. Okay. And I tried to understand a little more about exactly what does this business do based on competition. And I got lost here as well, because I'd never heard of Booksy, Fresho, or Agenda Pro.
Hold on, back up. What do local appointments have to do with fractured IT services?
That's what I started to think. So we go back here. Now I'm advocating from my understanding that this is the scheduling component, that businesses buy a Calendly or some scheduling app. Now, I'm totally trying to fill in the gaps here. Like I'm trying to make the argument work, but they don't have access to it, or they don't use it. And so CutFlow brings it together and actually allows you to manage it all in one spot. That's what I think.
Okay, so let's pause here. The issue is that we never understood the product on the first slide.
Yeah.
And we couldn't make up for it on the rest of the slides. A great way to say this, and I always tell founders all the time, I say, if you lost me on the problem and solution to some degree on the market size, you're not going to make it up in the rest of the deck. Said differently, if you've got me hooked on problem and solution, like I know exactly what it is, I'm fired up through the rest of the deck. Now, I may look at the rest of the deck and say, I don't like go to market, I don't like the financials, I don't like the competition. So be it. But at least I know what I'm talking about, or you know what the context is. When we get into a situation like this, where I can't even parse any of the other material, because I still am lost on what the plot of this is. Ed, we talked about this before. It's like whenever I watch a James Bond movie, I am so lost on why that movie is even happening. I want to like it so badly, but the plot is always so convoluted and complicated. I watch the whole movie like I can't even follow. When I'm looking at this deck, I want to know what these folks are doing, and I want to see what they're doing. They're not letting me.
Well, let's explore this a little bit further. Okay, how does a founder go from this? All makes sense in my head. So we're going to take for granted, like you said, in good faith, we're going to believe that the founder's got a solution here, that they're actually building something and it works, because there's actually evidently there's 200 people who've downloaded and there's users and everything. So something is going on, right? Great. How does a founder get out of that space in their head to actually break down problem solution in a way that you said that gets the investor excited right from the jump?
I think what we have to do is we have to take, what do you do best? What do you do best? So what will often happen is that we get into a position where we want to talk about everything that we do. And what we wind up with, as you're seeing, is the audience has no idea what you do. It'd be like this. Imagine you and I had just invented the first car, and everybody up until that point was riding around on horses. And as part of this, we were like, we've solved for motorized transportation, heated seats, audio, yada, yada, like all these things. And you're like, wait, hold on, this isn't a horse? You can understand how all of those features while awesome, still don't make a lick of difference if we haven't convinced the audience that the core thing we do, provide motorized transportation that isn't a horse, is primary. We have to establish that first, our core, most important value, before we're allowed to talk about anything else.
Speaking of horses, let's beat this one to death.
Okay.
Will, why? Why does an investor in their mind want you to pick what you do best?
Why, do they or don't they?
Do they?
Oh, yeah, because I've got a limited window of attention, right? And it's not because maybe I'm not a smart person. It's just that, like any human, I can only take on one thing at a time, right? So imagine you're watching a commercial, and the commercial is like, brand new, blah, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this, and like by the time they get to the 14th feature, you're like, wait, what does this product do again? We don't get that luxury with our pitch deck. I think as founders, we have this idea, this fantasy that our pitch deck is going to get digested like we submitted a term paper to our professor, or like we submitted a mortgage application to an underwriter. And that person's responsibility is to parse through it with time and attention and review. That happens never, right? In the same way, when people set up like a Tinder profile, they're like, maybe every person will go through every detail of my profile and look at all of my funny quips and whatever. It's like, no, they're going to flip through it as fast as possible. And the only way you can really screw yourself is to make it longer.
From the limited attention, let's expand that to limited funding. You know, an investor's thinking to you, and I got this from another general partner as he was explaining it. He said, you know, what it's like is like you're telling the investors that you're going to go out and catch every fish in the sea.
Yeah.
Marlin,
yeah.
You're going to catch like all the stuff. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. And therefore we need the money to buy the boat, get the crew, go out in the ocean, all these things. When the investor is literally thinking in their mind, listen, I just want you to go to the end of the dock and catch some fish on a regular basis. And then maybe get a boat and go out for half a day and catch some more fish and show me before I start buying you all this equipment and paying for all this fishing stuff. Show me you can catch some fish, the low-lying fruit, if you will. That's how an investor thinks. And that's why what Will is saying, everyone, in terms of ranking what you can do really good and you can dominate that market. The same way that Facebook said, we are only going to do Harvard. You had to have a Harvard email address in the beginning. And it was a genius move, Will. And I think founders just want to go out and say, hey, I'm going to tell the investors that we're going to catch every fish in the sea. We're going to catch marlin, trophy fish, everything like that. That's what goes through their minds.
And Ed, I think they do that because we want to believe that investors need to hear this big story. And on paper, it makes sense. But where we lose ourselves between they need to hear a big story and what our deck actually is they need to understand the story first before we can make it bigger, okay? So in other words, if you and I were starting Uber, we could sit there and we could list 20 things that Uber will do someday. Someday it'll deliver food, someday, all this stuff, right? And that's wonderful. It's a really compelling story, but not at the expense of saying, hey, private cars, black car service sucks right now, and it's a totally underutilized asset. And we're going to treat those people like taxi drivers and give people the ability to call them on their cell phone, from a mobile app. We'll do that first and focus on how that's an opportunity. And then we say, and as that grows, here are some areas we could get into, but not at the expense of explaining exactly what the core product is.
One example that stands out for me that illustrates what you said, I know you said Uber, which is just straightforward. I'm going to hail a taxi on my phone and someone else is driving it, right? And it started literally with taxis. Google was another really great example. It was like, we just have one box. Like back in the day, search engines were like portals and they want to do everything, be all things to all people. And then Google comes along and they just got one box and all you do is type in it. That's all you did. And that's how they went to market doing this one thing, and look at where Google is now.
It is. And it's one of those things where you don't win by how many things you do. You win by how many things you do right, or more importantly, you do best, which is usually one thing. And it's funny to me because so many companies to this day, Google is an interesting example because they've become quite the hydra. A lot of heads, a lot of really interesting businesses. But generally speaking, while Google has YouTube, it has Gmail, it has Docs, it has, incredible services that it's either acquired or developed, search is how they pay their bills. At the end of the day, right? Like if you took search out, Google wouldn't exist anymore, right? So it's still the same damn search box that's paying their bills 20 plus years later. And I think you've got to keep that in mind, right? Like Apple has morphed a bit, where now their phone business is kind of their business, right? But if you took the phone business away, the computer business would be dead. Every company, even at that scale, we're talking about the most successful companies ever, still has one thing that makes or breaks the company, but makes it because they do the one thing better than anybody.
Look at MailChimp. They're one startup that did not diversify, and all they do is send out emails, right? And it's always that temptation because you look at those big companies. I know how it happens, Will. You look at the big companies like Facebook and they're doing like, AR and VR and everything like that. But what founders don't understand is that after a company is successful at the one thing and they get to think of shareholders and they have to expand, that's what they do is they diversify. But in the beginning, that is precisely the opposite of what an investor wants to see, is that you're trying to be all things to all people.
That's exactly it. And so when we open up, we want to say this is what the consumer wants more than anything, and we're better at that than anyone. And then later in the deck, if we need to, we can expand a little bit. Sometimes that expansion comes on the market size slide where we say we're going to grow. Sometimes it goes to go to market slide. It could be, if you have it, a product roadmap slide, but you never win by just throwing up everything on a deck.
I want to address a question from the audience, which coincides with this. Let's talk about go-to-market slides. Now, this is our example from CutFlow here. I'm going to ask you some questions, Will. Right from the beginning, before we dive into this, I just wanted to put up a nice visual, break up the video a little bit. What do you think about go-to-market slides in general? Should they be included? Should they not? When, how, etc. Give me the scoop.
If it's a good go-to-market strategy. Now, I know good is a bit amorphous, but Ed, if you would pop this one back up. All right. So first step, build awareness and trust. We're going to establish credibility in key Latino markets in the U.S. tri-state area. That seems wildly specific. And while I like specific, I have no idea why key Latino communities in the U.S. tri-state area are specifically who we're going after. So this is what I mean. It's a go-to-market strategy without any understanding of why that strategy exists, okay? Campaigns to boost initial interest and engagement. That's literally every marketing strategy there is, right? You're offering no new information. You're not telling me anything that anybody else wouldn't be doing. But more importantly, you're not giving me a why, okay? So let me go to the second part. Drive adoption and conversion, okay? Reach local micro businesses with direct personalized outreach. What does that even mean? This is what I mean. A go-to-market strategy is great if there's something super unique about it. For example, Ed, you mentioned Facebook and Harvard. What you said was that was a clever go-to-market strategy. So I would use that specific slide, if I were Zuckerberg back in the day, to say our go-to-market strategy is to focus on Ivy League colleges because XYZ.
Yeah, exactly.
Once we've established that, we'll then move into this next tier, this next market with this milestone or this goal in mind. Highly specific, highly reasoned. Go-to-market isn't just what's your marketing plan. That's literally the same as anybody else would have any marketing plan.
Well, I'm going to be super mean, but I hope everybody takes this in the spirit in which it's given. This is the perfect slide if you are running a consulting company and you put up something in front of whatever CEO to make your company look smart. It's the typical standard. Here are the big buckets, and we're going to put out some fancy words and everything. And that's the reason when I see pitch decks done by MBAs or people with consulting backgrounds or they worked at Goldman Sachs, I can see it a mile away because it's like, oh gosh, it's kind of like this rule. Everything needs to be no bigger than 10-point font. And we need to put all these buzzwords and charts and everything like that to make it look impressive. And maybe in some strange world that is true if you're pitching a client. But I just glaze over at this stuff. And like you said, it doesn't tell me something that's unique. It just tells me like you could have hired an agency and now all my money's going to go to an agency and it's just fluff for that sake. You're not giving me a unique insight like Facebook had. And that's what I'm looking for. Instead of a laundry list of fancy terms, I'm looking for that unique insight in how you are going to beat the market and the competitors because you know something that everybody else doesn't know.
Right. And my friend Nick in the audience asked, do we need one for established businesses? And I would argue maybe. Okay. And when I say the maybe is there something unique that we're going to be doing differently with this established business post funding that we're going to want to express here? If we're not doing anything different, then the go-to-market really doesn't tell us much.
The other time that I've seen it work is if the marketing strategy is mature and they know their numbers and they can explain. So here's what we're doing. Here are the numbers. And this is what we're going to continue to do as far as a go-to-market strategy. I know a founder. We had a founder here that got a deal from Shark Tank, and he was a master at knowing his numbers in terms of go-to-market strategy down to the minutia. And he got lots of props for that because then the investor could do the math and say, oh, if I just pour gasoline on the fire with $1 in is $5 out, and you've got to figure out. But on the flip side, and this founder as well, Will, is they went out and they were using Google Ads, and that was their go-to-market strategy. We're doing AdWords. The investors weren't convinced. It was an investor, and their name started with A16Z. Okay, just in case you wonder, right? But they came back and they said, we just don't buy into your go-to-market strategy because the numbers just don't reflect the growth that we think this needs to have.
Right. Well, also, often a business can get to the point it got to with a specific marketing strategy that's worked. But one of the things that I always try to explain to clients, because I ran an interactive agency for a long time, is every startup or every business has kind of like these concentric circles, these growth circles, if you will, of marketing. When you first start off, when you're kind of in the center circle, if you will, when you first start off, marketing is often a lot cheaper and a lot more effective because you're kind of burning through the low-hanging fruit of who's easiest to find, your early adopters, right? So a lot of businesses will have rocket growth because initially they're going after the people that kind of already want the product. The challenge is once you exhaust those people, the challenge is once you've bought all the keywords that say, I specifically want to buy this, and you have to go to that next ring, which are people that maybe don't want to buy it. And all of a sudden your cost per acquisition, your customer acquisition cost goes through the roof because what you didn't understand was early on, you were acquiring people that were already in the store ready to buy, right? That's how they found you. That's why your marketing worked. And what A16Z would have been saying is, yeah, but as you start to expand this thing and go after people who sort of don't give a shit, that becomes exponentially expensive. So the metrics and the numbers that worked when you were only going after people that were already walking in your store blow up quickly when you have to get everybody else.
I want to double click on that and add to it on what you said, Will, and let's explore this. You talked about Latino communities, why, etc. And I think this is another thing that founders don't do very well in their go-to-market strategy is explain the entire customer discovery, the justification, the reasons we are doing it. And it's all aspirational. It just, I don't know, maybe you read a Gartner report and say they need it, and it just makes sense and it's logical, but there really is no customer discovery that's been baked into the go-to-market. And I see that a mile away, and that really puts me at a distance and says, ooh, I'm worried.
Well, all I want to know is why. Because what we were talking about were micro businesses. What the hell does that have to do with Latino businesses? Now, if what you were saying in the problem statement was that this is a particular problem for Latino-owned businesses, okay. I mean, I'd still have to understand why it's unique to them. But then this thing threads together. What happens is we often build these slides as founders. We also do this through lots and lots and lots of iterations. So the founder may have been working on this slide 3 weeks prior to working on the problem slide or the market size slide. And often they don't tie together anymore.
Yeah, I've been guilty of doing that, Will.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, this is one of those things where like, I'm not picking on this particular founder. I'm saying I see this all day long, right? So it's not surprising to me at all.
This is a great philosophical conversation. I think there are a lot of great nuggets. So let's get really explicit. So, Will, I want you to treat me like the founder. Okay, I'm showing this. Yeah. And you're going to give me a plan of how to go back and address this pitch deck. Yep. So let's go back to the problem slide. You gave it its flowers. You talked about what's good, but give me the action items of what needs to happen here.
I need to know specifically what services we're talking about and why they're inefficient and why fragmented matters. What happens when I use fragmented tools? What about that breaks? Because theoretically, if you look at our phone, right? I mentioned my desktop before, but you look at our phone, there are a litany of fragmented tools that do tons of different things, and yet we all get by just fine. Right? If we're saying that we're wasting $9 billion because services are fragmented, then we have to make a really compelling case of why fragmented is causing this inefficiency.
So this is the second part. Will already said 3.9 million U.S. microbusiness on 10 employees. Great. Waste $9 billion. Great. We just don't know the why this is important. And it's
I don't know what they're wasting it on. I don't know why those services are inefficient. And I don't understand why fragmented is a problem. Okay. I can't connect wasting $9 billion with that part of the problem.
Perfect. Next, solution.
Streamlines essential IT services into a unified platform. Because I don't understand why them being fragmented is actually a problem, I can't just say fragmented and all of a sudden I assume that everyone either knows the problem or even agrees that it's a problem. Enabling microbusinesses to reduce IT spending by 30%. Why would streamlining them allow them to increase efficiency or spend? That just doesn't make any sense. Like I take all the stuff that I work on right now, and are you saying that the reason I'm overspending is because I'm spending across too many platforms? If that's the case, what platforms are we even talking about? I need some concrete example of where and why this is a problem to understand why the solution's in effect.
Okay, now we didn't touch on this, but I'd love for you to give comments on this market opportunity slide.
Okay, so we got a bit of a challenge. So we're saying 3.9 million targeted micro businesses. I love that we're consistent with the problem. Spending 30 billion annually on fragmented IT. Now, I'm assuming that 30 billion, we're saving 30%, maps back to that 9 billion that's wasted. Again, that's just me kind of using my CFO hat.
Sure.
Assuming that happens to connect. Cutflow is a prime opportunity to deliver an affordable, streamlined alternative to essential operations. No one has told me what these essential operations are.
Gotcha.
Right? So I don't actually know what that means. And they're spending 30 billion on fragmented IT. Okay. But is it the case that we're going to capture all of the 30 billion? If not, then that's not our TAM. It's the case that we're only able to capture 9 billion, then that's our TAM. In other words, our TAM can't be bigger than the amount of money that we could make. We obviously can't make 30 billion because they're going to spend it on something. If our revenue is coming from the savings, and it may not be, then it has to be aligned there.
And the formula, to repeat over and over again, we just say it because this is one of the most common things, is instead of a top down, the entire industry is $4 trillion, we're going to make all that. It is take all the users, customers that you could possibly have that would want to use it and times it by how much money you think you're going to make. That is your TAM.
You're right. Your TAM can't include money you can't make, right? Now, it's going to include money you won't make, right? There's a big difference. The money you can't make, meaning those are customers that would never even buy from you or money that would never go to you, right? Now, the amount of money you won't make, here's a perfect example, phones. The TAM for phones, including Samsung and Apple and everybody else, right, is $582 billion. Okay, I made that number up. Now, Apple isn't going to make $582 billion, but if everyone only bought Apple phones, they would make $582 billion.
Yep.
That's how much they could make. That's not how much they will make. But now if we say the TAM for all of phones, right, mobile smartphones, et cetera, is 4.2 trillion. Well, Apple doesn't make products for those other phones. They don't make landlines, right? So they can't say part of their market is for stuff they don't even sell. That's where we always get into the thing where people say this is my industry versus this is my market.
Okay, so learn to do bottom-up market analysis. There are a lot of ways to do this. Figure it out. Let's get to the how it works slide. And Will, you always have a standard line, but talk about this slide, what's missing or what's off about this and what they should do with it.
I think I understand what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to present a world where all of these IT services exist and that somehow magically Cutflow is pulling them together, but there's still no indication as to specifically mechanically what they're pulling together or what that product looks like to the user. And I don't just mean like a screenshot, that kind of thing. I mean, what aspect of all this connects professional service providers? I'm not, those words don't connect with clients through a simple user-friendly platform. That tells me nothing. Okay. Simplifies payments, customer engagement, and operations in a trusted ecosystem. Almost tells me nothing. What I'm looking for is something a little bit more like this. Step one. Here's the customer's problem. Here's what they're trying to accomplish. IT manager is trying to manage 4 different services simultaneously, okay? Or I'll use not their example, something like the average creator has to manage 9 social media accounts at once, et cetera, okay? That's step one, identifying what the problem is. Step 2 is how did they use the product? Now, that is not a step-by-step instruction manual. Logged into site, open dashboard, clicked on it. Like, that's not what this is. It says once they did all those operations you're about to say, what did it actually look like? Client uses our tool to be able to post their videos in social media once and have it aggregate to all of the different platforms simultaneously without having to log all of them. Step 3 is the success. When Ed used this tool, he was able to manage and post to all of his social networks simultaneously without having to waste a bunch of time with each of them. So the first step is what was the problem? The second step is how do they use the product? And the third step is what did they get out of it? What was accomplished? Almost none of that is covered in this slide.
And I want to point out something that the founder can do. I'm curious your thoughts, but this is the traction slide. I left it to the end because clearly something's going on here. If there's $50,000, I don't know what ancillary revenue is, 200 downloads, 10 businesses, 1 influencer. They clearly signed up for something. They saw a value proposition. They're clearly doing something with it. Talk about that versus try and make up all this stuff about the future and this is a utopian world and everything like that. Just say, this is the problem we solve for these companies and present that, because an investor is going to be so much more impressed by the fact you built something and you actually have someone using it versus this major wild vision that you have for this software.
Also, we just talked about the Dominican Republic. I'm assuming the company is based there. That's usually, how this goes. But we opened up with U.S. businesses.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we can't grow, but when we're trying to stay focused, I would have opened up with something closer to Latin American businesses, or somewhere where we're trying to go. And then I would have built that into maybe in the market size slide. And this problem exists at a larger level. So here's our initial market with Latin America or these types of businesses, but we believe that can grow into a bigger business.
What would you say? It's more compelling argument. If I told you there's all this stuff for US businesses, but nothing in Latin America. So we're going to start there and not compete with the US businesses. And then eventually we're going to slowly start to eat in their pie. We're going to drink their milkshake eventually. But right now, this is a need. This is the market. That's so much more compelling.
I would have opened with that. It would also kept the narrative solid. So when we were talking about, hey, we're going to go into tri-state area and Latino communities, I would have had some context for why we were doing that.
Sounds good. Okay, Will, it's always great. We dove in. We say a lot of things over and over again because we see them comment, but we really did try to mix it up and kind of show it in different ways. I'm hoping that we get some feedback on this. But if you had to wrap this up in terms of what are the takeaways that we experienced across both pitch decks, what would you say to everyone?
Say less. Say so much less. Say so much less. Your deck is not a reflection of how much you can do. It's a reflection of how focused you are. You want that deck to say, holy cow, these folks are so focused on this one part of the problem. And man, if they get this right, there's so much further to go.
I would add to this plausibility. Say less, but make it plausible, because going in and saying, oh, we're going to eliminate debt, we're going to do payments, we're going to do all this and all in one. These were the common themes across it that myself, if you do that, you better bring a team that is Nobel Prize winning, already went public. Like the more promises you make, the more critical I'm going to be about the team.
I know. And you're a couple of people in a room. Find a bite that makes sense for your mouth. Right? Like, don't go crazy and say we're going to do boil the ocean. Again, you can talk about vision, but most of this has to do with what will you do plausibly.
That's fantastic. All right. We are here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, same time. Tuesdays, pitch deck reviews, twist Will's rubber arm to show up on a regular basis. Wednesdays, we do traction. We do go-to-market reviews. And then on Thursdays, we talk about all the answers. We answer the main questions. My main man, Will's going to be back here. We answer all the hot burning questions and we just rapid fire through them. So for those of you who are watching this, who are listening, get ready for those different sessions. Will, what's your final encouragement to have people join us at Startups.com?
Don't do this alone. I say this all the time. There's no reason you should have to learn any of this stuff. It's all been figured out. It's new to you. None of this is new. Just hop on Startups.com, reach out to us. We'll help you, right? Figure this out. You don't have to guess, and we'll get you on the right path. We'll get you doing 10 times more in half the time.
That's it for us. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks a bunch, everyone, for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.